Tov. Today's daf yomi is Nazir daf Gimel. We're going to start on the bottom of Bezim Mesechas Nazir, where if a person says, it said in our Mishnah, the person says that I will be beautiful, he's a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Vidilma, maybe it just means Anel Afanah b'mitzvos. Maybe it just means I'll make beautiful mitzvos. Like we learned in the Brayso, Ketitanya, Zekeli Vamdeyo. This is my God, and I'll glorify Him. I know in front of the mitzvos. I'll make beautiful mitzvos. As in front of Sukkah Noah, Lulav Noah, Tzitzis Noah. I'll make before God a beautiful Sukkah, beautiful Lulav, beautiful Tzitzis. Echtov in front of Sefer Torah. I'll write a beautiful Torah scroll. And I'll wrap the Torah scroll in a beautiful silk cloth. So why, if he says I'll be beautiful, doesn't mean he's a Nazirite? So Shmuel says the ukimta is. The case of our Mishnah is Shetafas Besaro. He's holding his hair and he says, I want to be beautiful. It means he wants to be a Nazirite. That's the context. Va'amar Anah. And he said he's holding his hair and he says, I want to be beautiful. So we assume that means he wants to be a Nazir. So the Gemara says, but why is being a Nazir something beautiful? Nazira milsa davera. Nazir is something that's a sin. And we're saying that it's beautiful. The Gemara says, no, it's not a sin. It is a sin. I know what you're saying, that you're saying you think it's a sin, but it's not really a sin because the Afilu on top of 3a, the Afilu Rebbe Lezer HaKapar, even according to Rebbe Lezer HaKapar, we're going to learn that he's of the position that a Nazir is a sinner. He doesn't really think he's a sinner. He's only a sinner. Hani Mili Gabe Nazir Tameh. When Rebbe Lezer HaKapar says a Nazirite's a sinner, that's only by a sinner, by a Nazirite who becomes Tameh, who he comes in contact with a dead body. The Adi Dibai, the Mistar, because he's going to have to, we're going to learn the halachos of a Nazirite who becomes accidentally or even intentionally Tameh in the middle of their Nazirus. They have to, whatever they've counted, they have to recount from the beginning. So therefore he's Mistar, he loses his days that he's counted until now. The Amar Achmana Vayemam Harishonim Yiplu, the earliest days will fall away. Ki tamei nizro, because he has become defiled in his nazirus. Hasamhu dilma asu amevar al nazirus. So there he's going to be considered a sinner, because since he has to repeat the days, we're going to see Queen Helena is going to have to do 21 years of nazirus. So there we say that maybe he's going to be in violation of it. Of al nazir tahor lav chote karibe. But even according to Rebbe Lezer HaKapar, who says that a Nazirite is a sinner, that's only by a Nazirite who's Tameh. But a Nazir Tahor is going to be not called a sinner. And the Rosh explains that there's two reasons why if the Nazir becomes Tameh, he's a sinner. One is it's too long for him to do, and number two, he's going to regret the sacrifices that he now has to bring. And then it's going to be bringing chulin, non-sacred animals, into the courtyard. So we see a fundamental point, even though we're going to see later on that there's a whole discussion about this, that another reason why he's considered a sinner is called the Sir Atzma Min Hayayin, is because he refrained from drinking wine. But here the Gemara limits it. It says the only reason why he's a sinner is because is what is referring to when he becomes Tameh. Baruch atah Adonai Melech HaMashiach Olam. So the Gemara says, if the person says Hareini Kazeh, he's also going to be considered a Nazirite. So the Gemara says, why? Ni nami de tafas besaro Hareini Kazeh lo amar. So okay, this is the issue of the gear, so we're not sure how to read this exactly. A lot of different texts, but we'll take the simplest reading of this, which is, even if you say that the Mishnah is talking about a case where he's holding his hair, which was the previous ukimta of Shmuel, nevertheless, Lo Amar, he only just said, Hareini Kazeh, I'm going to be like the hair. He didn't say anything other than that. So what's the ukimta here? So Amar Shmuel, to meaning the ukimta before is not good enough, because he doesn't say I want to be beautiful. He just says, I want to be like this. So why is this considered to be a Nazirite? So the Shmuel says, no, the ukimta here is Kigon Shal Nazir over a fun of. There's a Nazirite walking in front of him at the time. And therefore, we assume that he was saying, I want to be like this. and that means he wants to be like that Nazarite. Harini Masal. So Masal is usually understood to be something to do with the hair. So then he's going to be a Nazarite. So the Gemara says, Mimai Hadein Silsol Sa'ara. How do we know that the silsol is a reference to hair? The Gemara says, because there was once a maid in the house of Rebbe. We don't know if she was Jewish. We don't know anything about her, but we know that this maid had a big impact upon the Gemara because she's quoted a few times. And she said, Lahu Gavra, she said there was a person in the Rebbe's household. He says, Ad Masai, until what point? Hold on 1 second, just looking at, there's a note here. So she said to a certain point, a certain person, how long are you going to be playing around with your hair? So we see the misalsal has to do with hair. So the Gemara says, Ema Torah, maybe word salsal is a reference to Torah because it says salsala v'torah mamecha. Because it says in Proverbs, salsala usiro mamecha. And there it means to say, go over it again, and you're going to lift yourself up. So maybe it means Torah. So Shmuel says, no, Hachinami shetafas pasaro. He's saying Hareini Masalsa while he's holding his hair, so we know he's referring to hair, and he's referring to the Nazarite. Let's say he says Hareini Mechalkel, that's also a reference to hair. Gemara says, how do we know? Mimai da'adin kilkol sa'arahu. How do we know that kilkol is a reference to hair? Gemara explains, like we learned in the Mishnah, Sid was this type of ointment that they used to remove the hair from the body, like a depilatory cream. Rabbi Yehuda says, so what's the prohibition of carrying it out on Shabbos? You have to carry it out in order to be liable, the amount that you could use it. So what's the amount? So he says, Kedela Sud Kilkol, in order to remove some hair. And the Amar Rav, and Rav explained what Rabbi Yehuda said was Bas Tzada, Bas Tzida. This is the hair from the sides of the temples, a small amount of hair there. So we see from here that kilkol means hair. So the Gemara says, Ema Mezan Anya, maybe kilkol means to support a poor person, as it states, Yosef es Aviv Achav, that Joseph supported his father and his brother. So Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel says, okay, you're right. It's another concept, so that it's possible it means support. So what does Shmuel say? He says, no, the akimta here is he's holding his hair. He says, Hareini Mechalkel. It's obviously a reference to hair, and we assume that it also means he wants to be a Nazarite. What about if he says that also the Mishnah says is a reference to hair. He's going to grow his hair long. I raise a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Mimai, how do we know that if he says that's a reference being a Nazarite? How do you know Shiluach means to grow? So the Gemara explains because the verse states in Shir Hashirim Shilachayech Pardes Rimonim, that your production is an orchard of pomegranates. So the Gemara says, Ema Midei Da'avure, maybe it just means to say that it means you're going to remove the your hair, not that you're going to let it grow. Doesn't it say, doesn't it say in the verse in Job, God is saying, I'm going to send forth the water on the nations of the world, which means that he's removing it from the heaven and removing it from Israel, and he's putting on the nations of the world. So the verse says, Tana para. We're going to compare the word para, and that's how we understand that shiluach means grow. Because Yoav, it says by a Nazarite, he shall be holy. And so we know a Nazarite's not a sinner, he's called holy. And it says also over there, that the Kohen, a regular Kohen, is not allowed to let his hair grow long. So we see that the word Pharaoh is a reference to hair. So Shiluach Pharaoh means that he's letting his hair grow long. Even also when God says he's going to send forth water, it also means growth, because the kadmashkan lemaya lepera v'ravia. Because when the water comes, it makes everything grow. So maybe even from that verse, Shalech Mayim is referring to things growing. If a person says Harei Alai Tziporin, Rabbi Meir Omer Nazir. If he says that these are my birds, Rabbi Meir says he's a Nazirite. So there is a reference to at first glance. Well, we'll see what the Gemara is going to say, but just as a background, people should be aware that if a person becomes Tameh in the middle of their Nazirus, they have to bring what's called the Karban Tuma. And Karban Tuma, and he has to bring, as part of that, an Oa Achatas and an Asham. And the Ola and the Chatas are two birds, and so therefore those are the two birds associated with the Nazir who wants to become Tahor. So we see from here it says Arei Alai Tziporin, he's a Nazirite. My time, according to Rabbi Meir, but not according to Chachamim. My time with Rabbi Meir. What's the reasoning behind Rabbi Meir saying that he'll be a Nazirite? So Rabbi Meir says, not because of what we thought that is related to the sacrifices that the Nazirite brings, but it's because Amar Shlakish Tziporin Smuchum Aseir. Because in the Bible, in the book of Daniel, the word Tziporin appears in the verse next to hair. And we assume that the word Tziporin is a reference to hair. So that's what he says. Tziporin Smuchum Aseir Kibolav. That's what he accepted upon himself. He was associating with the word Tziporin, which is related to hair in the book of Daniel. Tachsev, as it states in the book of Daniel, Ad di Sa'arei Kinishrin Rava B'tifruhi Kitziporin. It's about Nebuchadnezzar, and it says the hairs of Nebuchadnezzar were growing like the wings of the eagles, and his nails were growing like birds. And so therefore he says, I'm like birds. It means he's growing his hair long. Rabbi Meir Sever Matfis Inish B'midei D'Samechai. That person associates the words in the Bible with the words that are next to it. And so therefore, when he says, I'm like the birds, it means I'm growing my hair long like Nebuchadnezzar was doing. The Rabbanan Sabri, but on top of Gemama base, but the Rabbanan of the position, Momatfis Inish, B'midei D'Samachai. We don't assume that the person is associating the words with the words that are next to him. So that's Rish Lakish's position. Rish Lakish's position that is that the dispute between Rameir and the Chachamim is whether or not a person, when he says words, that he's associating the next words to it in the Bible. That's what Rish Lakish says, and so therefore that's where Rameir says he's a Nazirite, and the Chum say he's not a Nazirite. Rameir says he's a Nazirite because that's what it was in the Bible, and the Chum say he's not a Nazirite because Adam is not matfis. Whereas Rabbi Yochanan comes along and says the koyama matfis. Rabbi Yochanan says no. Everybody says you're not matfis on the basis of the word. So if that's the case, why does Rabbi Meir say he's a Nazirite? I know time in there, Meir. The chashidim shemet tzipori nazir tami kibo. No, maybe he was accepting upon himself to bring the sacrifices that a Nazirite has to bring when he is tamei. He brings two. That he's going to have to bring two tziporim to purify himself. So the Gemara says, oh, so that's what Rabbi Yochanan says. Rabbi Meir is saying. We suspect that maybe he had in mind that he has to bring the sacrifices of the Nazirite. Dilma tzipurni dava kibolav. Maybe he was just bringing the bird offerings that were voluntary offering. Maybe he just wanted to bring voluntary bird offerings. That's all he had in mind. Maybe nothing to do with it in Nazirus. So the Gemara says, no, then if you intend to bring voluntary bird offerings, there's a special phrase you would use, and that would be, he would say, Harei alei kain, like the Mesechas Kinim, a very, very short, but very, very complicated Mesechta. So that's what he should have said. V'dilma Harei alei tzipori mitzora kamer. Maybe he was saying, listen, I intend to bring the birds of the Mitzorah. Maybe he didn't intend to do Nazirus, but he intended to bring upon himself the birds that a Mitzorah has to bring as part of purification process. And the Mitzorah, we know that the Mitzorah takes one bird, he slaughters it into a utensil, and then he dips the other bird, and he dips his blood in it, and he sets it free. Maybe that's what he was referring to. No, so the Gemara says, could go and try your Nazir over a funnel. We have the same Ukimta like before. He says, and there's a Nazirite walking in front of him. The Dilma Nazir Tameh, or Fotrum in Karbanos of Kamar. Maybe that Nazirite was ritually impure, and when he's saying this, he's saying, I'm going to bring his birds on his behalf. The Gemara says, could go and try your Nazir Tar over a funnel. Well, no, he was a Nazir who was not Tameh, he was Tahor. And so therefore, that's what's going in mind. So the Gemara says, "My benaya, what's the distinction between Reish Lakish, who says that it is Adam Matfis Matfis Inish B'midi. He associates the word in the verse and assumes whatever is next to it he's taken upon himself. And Rabbi Yochanan, who says no, that he had in mind the birds of the sacrifice of the Nazarite while there's another Tahor walking in front of him. So what's the actual difference between them and practically? You go into Amar Tziparna Smuchum Aseiralai. So let's say he says the birds that are next to the hair are upon me, which is clearly a reference to the verses. So under that case, Rabbi Yochanan says, everybody says Lo Matfis Inish. So therefore, what would be the case there? So Rabbi Yochanan Afagav the Amarachi Nazir over front of in Ilolo. Rabbi Yochanan said, even though he says that, I'm still only going to say he's a Nazirite. There's an actual Nazirite walking in front of him. And Reish Lakish says, Afagav de Nazir over front of, even though there's no Nazirite walking in front of him, we're going to say in those circumstances he's a Nazirite. The Gemara says, Mi ko amand amar lo matves inish b'milsei d'samachai. How can Rabbi Yochanan say that? Rabbi Yochanan says, everybody says you don't associate the words with the words next to it in the Torah. Is there really such a position? Is there really such a concept? Then we learn in the Brisa, Omer, Yamin, if a person just says Yamin, meaning the right hand, this is considered like he took an oath. My time, what's the reason why it's considered like he took an oath? Isn't it because it says that he lifted up his right hand. It says in the book of Daniel, and he lifted up his right hand and his left hand to heaven. And he swore by the living God. And so a person says Yamin is intending to the word that's right next to it. So therefore it's considered to be an oath. So how can Rabbi Yochanan say that that everybody does not associate these words in the verses? When we see there's a specific Brisa, and it's an anonymous Brisa that says that if you say Yamin, it's an oath. So Gemara says, Amri, no, Rabbi Yochanan would say, what would he say? No, it's because that's not a case of Hatvasa, that's not a case of associating with the words next to it, with the Shvua that's next to it in the verse, but rather the word Yamin itself means an oath. That the word Yamin itself means an oath. Because we say, Titanya Minayan Omer Yamin Shehi Shavua. How do we know if we say the word Yamin that it's a reference to an oath? As it says, Nishba Hashem Bimino. God swore with his right hand. And so therefore we see from here that the word Yamin itself is an expression of an oath. Minayan Omer small Shehi Shavua. And how do we know an left hand is also an oath? If you just say left, it's also an oath. Because it says uvizro uzo, because it says that in the continuation of that verse from Isaiah, the whole verse states, it says in that verse, Nishba Hashem bimino, uvizro uzo. And so therefore, since the yamin is already mentioned in that verse, the word bizro, which is the arm, is a reference to the left arm there. And so therefore we're saying that the zroa, so therefore if he says by my right or by my left, it's an oath. And so that's the reason why if a person says yamin, it's considered an oath. Says the Mishnah on the bottom of 3b, what does the Mishnah say? The Mishnah says, if a person says, I'm going to be a Nazirite, but he just says, either from the Chartzanim, the Gemara is going to discuss what it means exactly, but for now I'll translate it as the seeds of the grapes, or the Zagim. This is from, let's say, the skins of the grapes, meaning saying, I don't want to be he's not saying I'm a Nazirite from everything, he's just saying I'm a Nazirite from one thing. Minat tiklachas, or from cutting my hair, minat tuma, from coming in contact in a dead body. Then we're saying that because he said one part of being a Nazirite, he's going to be a Nazirite entirely. If he's a Nazir, it's as though he said Hareini Nazir without specifying, and all the laws of Nazirus are upon him. Meaning to say, it's not enough just to say he's a Nazir, but he's a completely Nazir in every aspect of his life. So this Gemara says, our Mishnah, which says that if you take upon yourself a Nazirite in one aspect, you're a complete Nazirite across the board. Our Mishnah must nisin look Rabbi Shimon. It's not like Rabbi Shimon, because what does Rabbi Shimon say? Tanya Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says you're not going to be liable for Nazarite until you accept everything upon yourself. The Rabbanan say, no, even if you only accepted one thing upon yourself, you're a Nazarite. My time with Rabbi Shimon. What's the reasoning behind Rabbi Shimon who says that you have to accept every aspect of a Nazarite upon yourself, or else you're not a Nazir, right? It's based upon the verse Amar Kra Mikol Asher Yaseh Migefen Hayayim Michartzanim V'Adzag. It says in the pasuk that a person becomes a Nazarite. He's a Nazarite from everything that Mikol Asher Yaseh, from everything that will be made from the grapevine, from the seeds until the skin he cannot eat. So from the fact that it says Mikol Asher Yaseh, that means everything. Yes, take a vow from everything, or else is not a Nazarite. Whereas Rabbanan, my taima, Amakra. So what's the reason why the Rabbanan said even if he just takes a Nazarite from one thing, he's going to be a Nazarite? Amakra, the pasuk says Miyayin v'sheichar yazirin. In Mesechas Nazir, the word sheichar means aged wine. So he says from wine and aged wine, he takes a vow of Nazirus. So meaning to say, aside from the beginning of the verse where it says in the next verse, in the previous verse, it said, Miyayim Shechar Yazir. And then it says, so we see from here, from the fact that it says, Miyayim Shechar Yazir, we see from here that in addition to everything that is included in Mikol Asher Yaseh Migefen Hayayim, we learn that even if he just says, from one thing, from Yayin or Sheikhar as one thing, then he's going to be a complete Nazarite in all of his laws. And that's how we're going to learn that verse. So we're going to say that under those circumstances, even if it just says from Yayin or Sheikhar, he's a Nazarite. So again, what's the dispute here? The Rabbanan say if you just take a vow upon one of the aspects of a Nazarite, say I'm a Nazarite from grape seeds, you're a complete Nazarite. But Rabbi Shimon says, you're only a complete Nazarite if you say every aspect of it. So Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Nami Yaksim Miyayim v'Sheichar Yazir. Rabbi Shimon also says that verse. So why doesn't he say that if you just take a vow from one of the aspects of a Nazarite, you're a vow completely from a Nazarite? Why doesn't he say like Rabbanan? No, he says, Hahumi Bayale Lasar Yayim Mitzvah Ki Yayin Rosh. He says, no, we needed a pasuk to specify why, to tell us that if the Nazarite, when he's prohibited to drink wine, he's prohibited to drink even the wine of the mitzvah. Just like he's prohibited to drink discretionary wine, he's prohibited to drink even the wine of a mitzvah. Now the Gemara says, well, what's wine of a mitzvah? When is it a mitzvah to drink wine? So if he takes a vow of Nazirus, then he's not going to be allowed to drink the wine of the mitzvah, and that is Kiddush and Havdalah. And that's what this verse is telling us. He's not allowed to drink also the Kiddush and the Havdalah. So the Gemara, okay, we'll stop the recording here. We'll continue for a few more minutes on the Zoom.